Hello, welcome to Eric the Linguist again. In this video, I'm going to talk about modality, one of the ways that you can express your voice in writing. When we do academic writing, we're often torn apart between writing objectively or having an opinion. Sometimes, in teachers' comments, you'll be asked to have your own voice, but sometimes they'll say your voice is too strong. Perhaps it's a matter of expression. What should we do if we can't use personal pronouns but need to give opinions? It's not that we can't use I think or I believe. It's just that we aren't using them in academic writing, that are focusing on knowledge more than ourselves. So there should be ways to get around this issue, right? We need to, first of all, understand how English statement works. A simple way to understand English statements is that they are first divided in two ways, yes or no, like do it, don't do it, it is not, I can, I cannot, and so on. But surely, you must be aware that there's a big grey area between the black and white. So we have maybe, yes, maybe no. Just like whether or not to go out with your boyfriend or girlfriend is too hurting to say no directly, but you hurt yourself by saying yes to a date you don't want. So English, like many other languages, provides the third option, not a yes, but not a no. Maybe. This gives room for your reader to consider how much you are inclined towards yes or no. And this depends on what words you choose to say this maybe. The commonest way to play with the grey area of maybe is to nudge the action described by verbs using modal verbs. Modals, by dictionary definitions, means tone or mood, such as under what mood you are making decisions or saying things. So the use of the modal verbs is a way to adjust the tone of your statements by adjusting the verb. We won't find the modal verbs unfamiliar, right? With single-worded items such as must, shall, may, can, will, and their corresponding past forms, should, might, could, would. Apart from modal verbs, there are also semi-modals that are formed with different words, such as have to, ought to, had better, used to, be used to, need, and dare. In this video, I assume that you understand all these modals and semi-modals, or you can refer to my another video on semi-modal verbs, especially about the functions. In terms of grammatical patterns, we form a verb phrase by combining a modal verb with a main verb in its basic form. That means, whatever time you are referring to, the main verb does not change its tense or form at all. For example, applicants should prepare well to succeed in a job interview. I have crossed out the D in prepared because there should be no tense change in main verbs with the use of modal verbs. You may also note at the beginning of the sentence I add an asterisk. Grammatical sentences and phrases are marked with asterisks in my videos. Also, we don't need the preposition to between the modal and the main verb. Again, applicants should too prepare well to succeed in a job interview. This already sounds pretty strange, right? So I would cross out to between should and prepare because we don't have to use two infinitives after the modal verb should. Simply, after the subject noun, we add the verb group with the modal verb, and that's it. But you may wonder, how are we using modal verbs? After understanding where we should put modal verbs in a sentence, let's take a look at how we can understand the strength of the modal verbs. Assume that these modal verbs are between yes or no, or do or don't. In this case, we have a scale of possibility as to whether something happens or it doesn't happen. So between them, we have must, the closest to do or yes. And then we have will, would, followed by should. We can also use can or could, and relatively the weakest in terms of possibility will be may and its past form might. Okay, inclining towards do not or it doesn't happen, we simply negate or put not after these modal verbs. So ranging from mightn't, may not, couldn't, can't, and shouldn't, wouldn't, won't, and the strongest mustn't before the absolute no, don't, it doesn't happen. The second function, obligation, means how is or was someone obliged to do something. For example, Eric must finish his class prep by Friday. It can mean Eric is under some kind of obligation or pressure suggested by someone, maybe his boss, that he is to finish the class prep by Friday. The second example, he should turn down all other tasks but may choose to take a break occasionally. In the second case, the obligation is less strong, so the writer chooses should. The obligation is even lower in may, suggesting a few possibilities. 1. It means Eric is allowed to rest, or he is likely to take a break out of exhaustion. The third function, necessity, means how much does or did someone need to do something? Or we can say, how is it not possible not to do something? For example, fishes must live in water or they die. It means it is not possible for them to not live in water. Similarly, he must breathe or he will suffocate. It means it is not possible for him not to breathe or he will die of suffocation. This function will be the most straightforward. Ability means how well does or did someone do something. In terms of capability, the modal verb would be can or could, similar to the phrase is able to. For example, Alex is a professional swimmer. He can finish a lap in 30 seconds. It means he is able to do that. The second example will be the past form for can. So we have could. He recently retired from swimming. He said he could not swim faster anymore. And the last function is generally less discussed. Is habit. We can use modal verbs to talk about habits in terms of how regularly does or did someone do something. For example, that's typical of Hal. He would be really mean. In this case, the use of would represents Hal's habit to be a mean person. The second example, when weather is good, Haley will go sunbathing. It means the general habit of Haley, usually talking about either the present or the near future. After saying so much about modal verbs and their functions, it's good to know more about how we can use modal verbs in academic writing. Okay, of course, all these 5 functions will appear in academic writing, but one of the most common way to use modal verbs would be to adjust possibility. By adjusting possibility, we mean we use modal verbs to adjust arguments or arguments from others. In this example, we have 2 instances of modal verbs. So let me read this passage out for you. 3 future directions for investigating Hong Kong English popular music might interest sociological, linguistic, or music researchers. For example, the language preferred by musicians or show organizers on Hong Kong Island may be different from that favored in Kowloon. In the first instance, it is possible that the writer is not so sure about whether his recommendations would really interest other researchers, so he chooses the modal verb with the lowest strength, might. In the second example, the writer is also playing with the possibility, assuming that one thing is different from another, but such an assumption is less certain. That's why he uses may as his choice. Generally speaking, in academic writing, when it comes to giving arguments or viewpoints, the modality that we choose would usually be low, because we don't want to be too assertive, or we don't need a very strong voice. However, if you can suggest evidence, such as facts, statistics, or other examples in support of your arguments or viewpoints, it is possible that we can use higher modality. That means stronger modal verbs. It is obvious that we don't just use modal verbs in order to show our tone or our position. As I've just said before, apart from modal verbs, we also have semi-modal verbs. In the coming videos, I'll talk more about semi-modal verbs and their uses in academic writing. So that's all from me. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.